It's the Hoffman Show. We're on the Team 980. We are always live as well on the free Odyssey app, streaming live on YouTube at the Team 980 as well. And Anthony, I know you have to run out to the other studio to do something real quick, but I would like to prove to everybody that for the first time in 2 weeks, the two of us are back together in the same place.
Yes, it's been a long time, Craig.
I was sick, and then, well, first I was like gone on vacation. Except for I wasn't really on vacation because I still had to work. And you were gone some of those days too.
Yep.
Then I got back, but I was sick. And so I wasn't here in the studio. I was doing the show from home and then one day I couldn't even do that. And then you got sick. But ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, for like the 6th time in 2025, here we are on February 3rd and Anthony and I are together.
Hey, that is, when you put it into perspective like that, that is insane, Craig.
Reunited and it feels okay. Go do whatever you got to do. I'm gonna talk about what Josh Harris did today. Which, first of all, I would like to say the fact that the Commanders again have an owner who feels like it is his responsibility to answer questions from the press at the end of a season. This is how sports are supposed to work, everybody. I know it's weird because we're so used to the fact that Dan Snyder was a recluse and didn't hold a press conference for the better part of a decade. And even when he did pop his stupid little head up, he didn't answer any questions about anything, from the coach he just hired to the executives he hired or fired or the brand. Like, he didn't answer questions about anything forever because he was terrible. But Josh Harris, he's here. And he understands that accountability, and who knows, maybe he'll do like a fan Q&A at some point, but at the very least, like holding a year-end press conference is pretty standard operating procedure for most sports team owners. And good for Josh Harris for doing it here a week after the season. Now, the number one question on everyone's mind for ownership was the branding and the team name. Obviously, there's a lot of questions about the stadium situation, but as it has come back up again in recent days, and my pal Don Van Natta even said on our show, like, he's heard that perhaps the team is really considering it, but there are other considerations as the team finds success that perhaps maybe they're less open to it now than originally thought. Josh Harris definitively came out today and said the Commander's name is here to stay. He was asked about it first question, and he was like, this name starts to mean something in the building. And then he was asked later by Stephen Wino directly, like, is it safe to say the Commanders is here to stay? And he said, yes. And good for Josh Harris for shutting this down. Not necessarily to say, like, I would say this, right? When I say good for shutting it down, thank God we have an answer. Because if he had also come out today and said, yes, we are going to eventually embark on a rebrand, then that would also be an acceptable answer to me. What I appreciate what Josh Harris did today is shutting down the limbo. The will they or won't they is over. And the fact that it happens to be over, I think is actually a really good thing as well, because now we all can collectively move on. It's over. It's done. We can move on to everything else that matters a million times more than a name, which is the football and how they build this team from an NFC championship game participant to a legitimate Super Bowl contender, as if they weren't already. If you're in the NFC championship game, you're a legit Super Bowl contender. But a perennial Super Bowl contender at the level that they want to be, where they go up to a matchup or into a matchup with a team like the Eagles, and they are not a, hey, maybe if everything goes right type of underdog. They're a team that Philly looks at and goes, oh God, that's our equal. But when it comes to the name itself, I'd like to talk about it, I don't know, one final time. Brand names don't become brand names by merely existing. They become brand names by establishing themselves as successful. And that goes for sports teams that get associated with excellence, or things like Q-Tip or Kleenex that are so clearly the best in their field that they become synonymous with the very thing itself. Now, before we go any further, I want to do two things. One, for those that have not heard me talk about this topic before, I choose when talking about it not to use the old nickname at all. I'm also not someone who is going to shout you down when we open up the phone lines if you do. That is not, I might poke fun with a little Doug Williams action because it's funny,
We are the Commanders.
And we might even go the full Craig Melvin. But I'm not going to shout you down and be like, how dare you? But I choose not to use it because there is a disagreement in Native American and Indian circles about whether or not that word is a slur. And while there are plenty of indigenous folks who aren't offended by it and some who even see it as a term of honor or endearment, I choose not to say it because of the folks who do see it as a slur, and I don't see it my place to cross them. I also know that most fans who still say the old nickname are referencing a football team and not trying to be offensive, and I think that matters. I think the intention matters. So that's my reasoning. That's where I stand. That is my choice. You are more than free on this show and in your life to make yours, and now that we've established that ground rule, we can move on from that part of it. I also want to acknowledge that there are 3 groups of people who passionately wanted to see the name changed. First, there are those who are acting in good faith that don't want to see the name go back to the old one at all, but hate Dan Snyder and or the name Commanders because it's pretty objectively lame, and they want to see the team move forward from the Commanders, one more name change, one final time, and then we are done. The second group, I think, is also acting in good faith, and those are folks who want to see the name go back because that's the era that they remember with the most fondness. It's those of you who are most likely to say, I want my team back, and I totally get that as well. And then there's a third group who isn't acting in good faith at all and sees this as a culture war. They like saying the old nickname because they think that they're doing something politically. And I don't understand that one at all. To me, y'all have lost the plot about what sports are about, winning, cheering on your team, being a part of a community that can come together despite any other differences you may have politically or otherwise to do something that is fun as a city and cheer on the guys on the field or the gals on the field or court. You've also lost the plot on probably some other things in life, and I don't have time for that right now. So I know that I'm not going to convince the third group of people of much of anything. So I'd like to talk to the first 2 groups or anyone that maybe is on the fence of the second and third group, someone who is maybe questioning how they feel about going back and what those motivations truly are. After the season that Washington just had, where perhaps the rage of feeling like the world took away your team ran into the joy of seeing them actually be good and playing well again, and you're trying to make sense of that. So the first person that you can thank or blame for what Josh Harris did today, to me, is actually Adam Peters, because it was Peters who led the entire free agency and draft process last year, saying that they were, quote-unquote, looking for Commanders. They had the Commanders tag in the draft and all of that. So when Josh Harris says this...
Yeah, so just to hit the name first, like we're focused on, we're back to saying, you know, what we said all last year, which was focused on winning football games, on getting prepared for next year, on fixing up Ashburn and the stadium. We could talk about that. And then on engaging with the community of Washington. And so right now, and now in this building, the name Commanders means something. It means that, you know, it's about players who, you know, are love football, are great at football, hit hard, mentally tough, great teammates. And so it's really meaningful that that name is growing in meaning. And so, but as far as rebranding and bringing our past, you know, which obviously I grew up with, and all the Super Bowl championships and our future together, you're going to see us head back towards, you know, honoring our past and bringing it together with
our future, how that quote ends up. And he talks about how it means something to people in the building. Adam Peters is at the head of that. If that makes you hate Adam Peters or even dislike him a little more, I really want you to sit with that. Think about it. What is it exactly that you want out of your sports? Because if it's not winning, that is inherently, by definition, loser behavior. And that's not an endorsement of having no brand image or identity. It's not saying change it every year as long as they win. That's annoying, and it does take away from the experience of building something that you can feel proud of. But if Commanders become synonymous with excellence, isn't that kind of the point? And for a lot of folks in that second group that I talked about, that's really what this was about. The old moniker was about excellence, even though for 30 years it was mostly synonymous with embarrassment and whatever the most polar opposite of excellence is. which also meant that means for anyone under the age of 35, there was literally zero excellence to remember. This team was as embarrassing as you could possibly be, named that old name for the entire time. But then there's also the historical argument that some people make, and I'd like to address that because I think I can pretty quickly shut down that thing once and for all. The argument that you must go back because we cannot possibly have a team named by Dan Snyder because Dan Snyder is awful and did awful things, and it cannot possibly stand, holds zero water if you know anything about the team's previous permanent name. The team was called the Braves when it was founded for the incredibly highbrow reason that they shared a stadium with the baseball Boston Braves, a.k.a. the original team owner, George Preston Marshall, was lazy, didn't think of anything original at all. He was so lazy, in fact, that when they moved stadiums across town in Boston, that they were now playing at Fenway Park, the home of the Red Sox, they changed the name to the old one, but wanted to keep their logos. No effort to redesign. Just let's literally change the name, and I'm too lazy to do anything else. Influencing that decision at the time of keeping the native heritage or native logos was the team's coach, William Dietz, who liked to be called Lone Star Dietz because he proclaimed that he was of Indian descent. He claimed that his mother was of the Sioux tribe, except most historians think he was completely full of crap. He was German, but liked the attention of proclaiming he was native. His story changed all the time to be convenient. He was notably great at PR for himself and himself only, and most historians have debunked his native origins and said he was a con man. And if you need a reminder, by the way, of who George Preston Marshall was, oh, buddy, I got some news for you. He was the avowed racist who resegregated the NFL in the 1930s and made sure that Washington was the last team to resegregate in the 1960s, desegregate in the 1960s. Only doing so, only allowing black folks onto his team because the D.C. city government was going to ban the team from playing at D.C. Stadium if they didn't. So, in response to wanting to avoid all the things that Dan Snyder did, all of the terrible things, anyone who wants to go back to the name created by the most racist owner in the history of the NFL, so racist, in fact, that the team went from powerhouse in the late 30s, winning NFL championships, to being one of the worst franchises in the league because they simply refused to let some of the best players in the sport on their team because they were black. That was the guy who owned it. And if you want to go back to the name created by that guy and the con man, I think that your argument doesn't hold a whole lot of water. So, forget whether the team name is a slur or racist or offensive or any of that. If we're into getting rid of nicknames because of terrible owners, that one should have been gone a long time ago. So if you want to move forward, I get it. Today's a bit of a bummer. And I'm all for moving forward off of Commanders because of Snyder and saying that was his last imprint. Let us move on. And I genuinely feel for anyone who feels passionately about that. If you didn't know any of the history that I just told you and you need a moment, I get that too. But ultimately, the same reason the old nickname overcame that history with Senor Doofus Dietz and George Preston Marshall is because the team won. That Joe Gibbs came along and with Joe Theismann, Doug Williams, and Mark Rippon, won Super Bowls and created a bond with the city and a bond with the fans that has lasted 30 years later through all of the BS of the Snyder era. There is that deep, rich, emotional connection. And that was enough to overcome what was the history of the origins of the old team name. So because of those reasons, I love that Harris and the team plan on honoring those players and that past and the rich history of the franchise that exists here in D.C. But as we firmly enter the next phase of Washington football history, it was time to close that open door.
Josh, Steve Weiner from the Associated Press. Following up on John's question earlier, is it safe to say the Commander's name is around just to stay? Is that safe to say from your standpoint?
Yes. And we're actually, I think it's now being embraced by our team, by our culture, by our coaching staff. And so, we're going with that.
And so today, he did. I don't often take calls on this topic, but I think today's an appropriate day to do so. Your calls on this and what Josh Harris had to say about the future of the Commander Stadium next on the Team 980. It's the Hoffman Show. We're on the Team 980, always live as well on the free Odyssey app. Taking your calls, 301-230-0980. By the way, still to come on the show today, David Aldridge chimes in at 5 o'clock on everything with Commanders, but also, I don't know if you heard, but there was a big NBA trade this weekend. Oh my God, the Luka Doncic Anthony Davis trade. We're going to talk about it later on in the show, and we're going to get David Aldridge's take on it, because when you have a Hall of Famer that you can call up, you do that in this kind of situation. So DA with us coming up at 5 o'clock. Also, the Myles Garrett trade situation. What a freaking wild weekend in sports, considering there weren't a ton of games going on, certainly high-profile ones. College basketball, there's some good ones over the weekend, but so we'll get all to that to all that in a little bit. But let's take some calls now. 301-230-0980. You heard Josh Harris say Commanders is here to stay. What do you think? Let's start off with Stevie. Stevie, thanks for calling. You are on the Hoffman Show.
Okay, so I just heard what you just said. I did not hear the interview. So he's saying that the Commanders are it. That's the name of the team. It's not going anywhere.
Yep, that's what he said. We played the bite. They're in between me talking. So yeah, that's what he said.
Suck. That sucks. Well, that takes care of what I wanted to talk about a little bit. Listen, I will talk about one thing, and that's why the old name had to go. You were talking about racism and Deedle and all that and so on. Let me give you another insight on what – I'm not an expert. I'm not a Native American. But a friend of mine who is a golfing buddy of mine, he is a Native American. We're friends because I went to LSU. He played golf. He was a golfer at LSU. And he also was the spokesman for all Native Americans in the United States in Congress. So he knew what he was talking about. And he said to me, he said, "Say, Steve," he said, I know you think this and that about why the name had to go, but this is the real reason why. And I'm listening. He said it's not because it's racial, it's because it's genocidal. And I looked at him, probably looking the same way you're looking at the phone right now, thinking, what the hell are you talking about? Well, he said to me, he said, between the 1600s and the middle of the 1800s, what they had bounties out on Native Americans. You went out
Correct.
and killed one, you got paid for it, right? When you went back, you didn't carry the bodies with you.
Nope, you carried the
So
scalp.
you
And that
scalped
scalp,
them.
yes, that
And the
scalp
scalps
is
were
called
called
the old
redskins.
nickname. Yes, correct. That is the history of the
That's
term
right.
in many, many tribes. Baxter Holmes, who many folks know from his work covering the NBA for ESPN, wrote a piece in Esquire in 2014 that I often send people that describes exactly that. Baxter, by the way, grew up Native American on a reservation in Oklahoma. So yes, I actually am familiar with
Right.
that story.
Okay, well, good. I'm glad you're familiar with that. So, it's the other thing too is the name Commanders. It just doesn't mean anything to me, or at least to this town. The one thing I was hoping for was that they would do a little bit of research. I wanted to name them after African-American heroes. And people say, okay, well, what's that? I wanted to name them after the Tuskegee Airmen. Now, you say, how do you name them the Tuskegee Airmen? You don't. You name them after their squadron, which was called the Red Tails. And that's the name I wanted. I wanted to name them after African-American heroes called the Red Tails, and then you could use a red tail hawk, as the mascot for the team, not that stupid pig. So that's what I'm looking at. That pig has got to go. I don't know where it came from, but that dumbass pig is ridiculous. No, if you've seen a red-tailed hawk, they are majestic birds. You can train them just like they do with the eagle up in Philly, like they do in Auburn, and like they do with a Seahawk out there. It is an amazing thing to watch that bird train to fly around the stadium after they score or before games or whatever. And not only that, but as far as the red tails go, I had this vision of P-51s flying right over the top of the stadium, blowing out burgundy and gold smoke. Commanders, it doesn't even It doesn't even work in the song. It's ridiculous.
No, and
hopefully they're not.
Yeah. Steve, I gotta let you run because we're up against the clock. But I appreciate your call. I love your passion.
Okay,
your historical knowledge is fantastic. Yeah, I mean, like, this is kind of the thing, right, with team names. Is there a way to do what Steve suggested and honor something that is native to DC? Sure. The Capital City Go-Go. Fantastic. Awesome nickname. Works way better in minor league basketball than it would perhaps for if it was the NBA team, where the NBA team, when they rebranded in the late 90s, was like, alliteration, Washington Wizards. Cool. Done. That name means nothing and continues to mean nothing because that team has done nothing for the entire history that they've been the Wizards. But, like, the New York Yankees, which are synonymous with excellence I know most people hate them, but, like, they've won more championships than anybody else in American sports. And that name becomes synonymous with excellence in large part because they just won. If not, it's like a stupid name of, like, who actually calls anybody from New York a Yankee outside of, like, Southerners who hate them? Like, it's objectively not actually that great of a name. Red Sox, like, Red Sox? Really? That's what we're doing? They're from Boston, and their socks are red in hue. Like, the Chicago Cubs, I know they're not synonymous with excellence. They're, in fact, synonymous with being lovable losers for most of their history. But, like, oh, a cute little bear cub. Like, there's no ferocity. It's not like the Chicago Bears. In football, it's like, oh, okay, we get why we want to be a bear. Like, most of the good feelings that get engendered by a name. Because I'll tell you, here's, I guess, the counterpoint I would make, right? To Steve's point, something that honors the Tuskegee Airmen, for instance. Beautiful, great, get the history, love that. And I think teams that can pull that off and do it well, they deserve a hat tip. And Dan Snyder and the committee that picked Commanders, which was mostly Dan Snyder, went against all of the information that they had, all the focus groups, et cetera, from what my understanding of it. Like, it was Dan being like, I want the military. And it specifically like, I want Raytheon money because he thought he could sell more sweets. Because he's an idiot. That was the case. That's cool. But if they were called the Red Hawks or the Red Wolves or the Red Tails or whatever other name that people liked more, and they were booty on the field, people would hate the name. Simple as that. So it's like the team name Commanders has never had a higher approval rating than it does right now. The reason is because Jaden Daniels is the quarterback. 301-230-0980. More of your calls next. It's the Hoffman Show. We're on the Team 980, always live as well on the free Odyssey app. Taking your calls at 301-230-0980. Josh Harris announcing today that the Commanders' nickname is here to stay. In case you missed it, here was the exchange with Steve Wino following up on a question that was asked by John Keim earlier on in the press conference.
Josh, Steve Weiner from the Associated Press. Following up on John's question earlier, is it safe to say the Commander's name is around just to stay? Is that safe to say from your standpoint?
Yes. And we're actually, I think it's now being embraced by our team, by our culture, by our coaching staff. And so, we're going with that.
We're going with that. Is it here to stay? Yes. There you go. As definitive as he's ever been. And that comes, by the way, as the new president of business operation starts this week as well. So that is one less thing on his plate, or perhaps in his bowl. Yes, that was a terrible Campbell soup joke. Let's go to Keith. Keith, thanks for calling. You are on the Hoffman Show.
Mr. Hoffman, I am so proud of you. You did an outstanding job educating everybody about the history of the name of the Redskins. And I was not one who was, I wasn't against them changing the name. I wasn't for it. I didn't really care. I did hey, look, get rid of it. I'm fine with that. But give us a better name than the Commanders. Now that he said the Commanders' name is here to stay, at least give us our colors back. Give us our colors back. Put the arrow on the helmet. Keep it as Commanders. Put the arrow on the helmet. Give us our colors back, and give it that little fat pig that's out there on it. Because that still fat pig is an embarrassment to the team. And I'll pretty much try to get with buying the stuff that we sell. Right now, I don't have anything. Everything that I have that has the Watch the Commanders on it was given to me by all of my clients for Christmas and birthdays. I didn't buy one thing, and I just can't buy. I can't get into it. But I may be able to get into it if they give us our colors back. But 1 minute we look like the Pittsburgh Steelers out there. Then the next we look like the Maryland Terrapins. Then the next minute we look like it's just so many teams. I'm like, who are we going to look like today?
I hear you.
So I'm just so proud of you. You did an outstanding job on educating everybody. And other gentlemen who came in and said about the scalps, outstanding. And that's what we need to hear. And they can understand, hey, look, maybe we need to get away from that. I was really looking for the Warriors. I thought the Warriors would be a great name. I don't know why. Maybe you know why we couldn't get the Warriors name.
Yeah, I think most of the names that they wanted that they couldn't get had to do with IP, intellectual property stuff. And that intellectual property stuff is a really thick, just brutal area of law that is incredibly hard. It's not the kind of thing where you can easily buy someone off, or that it's very easily settled. If people want to just be like, nah, it's ours, they can kind of do that. So, whether, and I do think part of it too, Keith, and by the way, I appreciate the nice words, but if you're Arkansas State, right? Because Red Wolves was undoubtedly the most popular name amongst the fan base, right? And the Arkansas State University holds the intellectual property rights and the copyright and all that kind of stuff to Red Wolves. And if you're Arkansas State and your brand name could be getting confused with Dan Snyder's football team at the time, why would you want that? There's no amount of money you can give me that makes me feel good about that. Certainly not one that Dan Snyder and them were willing to pay. And so I think, for the Warriors, you're fighting with the Golden State Warriors over that. You're fighting with other teams, potentially high school teams, potentially other colleges that have had that name for a long time. It's a lot of legal stuff to go through. So unless you can find something that's wholly original, that becomes very, very difficult. And lawyers is a terrible reason. It's not a terrible reason. It's an unsatisfying reason to the general public of why stuff doesn't get done. But realistically, that's why they couldn't do some of the things that I think were far more popular. And now I get Josh Harris not wanting to have to deal with forget having to take down some of those walls for some of the names they might have wanted, but put up those walls. That's expensive. All the branding stuff is really expensive. Redoing all the imaging around all of the stadium and all that stuff again. I think it's going to be expensive enough and worth it to do exactly what you said, which is if we're going to not just completely break, which I think there was an opportunity to, right? I've long said that if the NFL wanted to completely start over, essentially, that the opportunity was there to kick Snyder out of the league, change the name, get a new owner in and do everything. And if you want to like move on from the colors and do all of that and reset and be like, this is a new franchise, the one that Dan Snyder owned doesn't exist. We're still going to honor Joe Theismann and still honor Doug Williams and still honor that stuff. But they could have redone that. But since they decided to stick with burgundy and gold, which I'm fully okay with, for the record, I'm not saying that like that's the thing I would endorse, just that opportunity came and went when they refused to kick Dan Snyder out of the league, even though they had every possible way to do that. But like once you stuck to burgundy and gold, make it burgundy and gold. I don't even mind the Washington W. Like I think that thing looks pretty sleek, but the colors aren't right based off the history. And so, to your point, Keith, what I like about that is, like, you presented it in a very funny way of, like, one day we're the Pittsburgh Steelers, one day we're the Maryland Terrapins. Like, you should at least be, if you're going to be the Washington Commanders, be the Washington Commanders. And it feels like that's what Josh Harris and the new team are going to try to do.
Good. Thank you so much for your time. I appreciate it.
Absolutely. Thanks for calling in, Keith. Let's go to Ross in Tampa. Ross, what's up, dude? You're on the Hoffman Show.
Hey, what's going on, Craig? How you doing, man?
I'm good, bro.
I'm doing better too, man. The trio's back together. You got Hoffman, you got Haney, and you got Ross, man. Ain't no better trio out there. Name a better one. I'll wait. But the name thing, I talked to Russell about this a year ago, man. This was like my 5 stages of grief. I didn't understand why the name was gone. And then, I did a little bit more research on my own, and I listened to guys like you, Andy Pollin, Steve Zabin, Kevin Sheehan, and I figured out, okay, cool. The name's never going to come back. And I always said if they weren't going to bring the old name back, which I knew was impossible, that you just keep the name the same, and you'd hope that Josh Harris would end up doing what he did. And, yeah, that's a good point that you mentioned earlier, Craig, because I always thought about that long video that Adam Peters and the Commanders had dropped during when they were showing us all the draftees' reactions to being selected, the Commander tag. And they really took that name and they made it something special, whereas Snyder just kind of threw it out there. He didn't even look like he was happy for the unveiling. He looked like a bum, but I'm not even here to talk about Snyder. What I want to talk about is the next generation. My grandfather passed away about 5 years after Redskins became more of a national controversy. I've been rooting for the Redskins. I've been rooting for Washington since 2004, and I didn't hear about controversies until the early 2010s. Now I think about people like my son. I won't strong arm him to root for the team that his father roots for, but if he sees me cheering for Jaden Daniels and he sees the product that's on the television with Jaden Daniels, why would he not want to join me? And then his next generation, and then generation after that, because I talked to Anthony about this off the record. If you would have renamed us the Packers, like, huh? Like, what are you talking? Or the Steelers. Like, those names have meaning, but this name has meaning too. People just can't get off the fact that it was Snyder's last trace of holding on to this team. But when I heard the interview live, the press conference live, and when he said the name's here to stay, I wasn't mad. I mean, I'm disappointed that the name's been gone all these years, but people also, Craig, need to understand that this man just dropped $6 billion, and he needed a whole bunch of people to help him make that purchase. You really think he's got a stadium in D.C. and Philly? You think he wants to put more money down for a fifth name change? What would that be, like 4 or 5 different names in 4 years? So I understand the logic behind him not wanting to do it. But, hey, at the end of the day, the only thing I do want to tweak are just the uniforms. Put your little Commanders twist on it, maybe a smaller font on Commanders and all that stuff. Craig, that's something I can DM you about, what I would like to see with the uniforms. But in terms of name, man, hey, hail to the Commanders, man. It's all good. Let's win a Super Bowl in the next few years.
Yeah, hey, I hear you. And, Ross, I think that's the most important point. Thanks for the call, man. Commanders meant nothing until this year. And then think about that Commanders log episode on YouTube that the team put out of Adam Peters talking about, we're here to find Commanders. Like, we are here. And, he gave it meaning. And then they went out and they kicked everybody's ass. And they got meaning out of it. It meant something to be a Commander. And so the idea that the name Commanders means nothing isn't true anymore. Now, if I tell you, hey, this is what it means to be, or tell me what it means to be a Commander, it's exactly what Josh Harris said. It's about being smart. It's about being physical. It's about being tough. It's about also being kind and a good member of your community in a way, right? Like guys like Bobby Wagner and Terry McLaurin, those guys embody what it means. Zach Ertz, Jaden Daniels, what it means to be a Commander. And now that it has meaning, we can start to stack good memories in the same way that the good memories were stacked with the previous name. And we can all laugh at the Washington football team era together and the 7-9 division title that Ron Rivera won. 301-230-0980. That's the only one that means nothing, which is, it's kind of sad in a way because objectively, I think Washington football name was kind of cooler than Commanders on a pure name level. But, hey, if Jaden Daniels is a Commander, go Commanders. 301-230-0980. Take more of your calls, including I got some folks who want to talk more about the uniforms. I'm down for that. We'll talk about it all next here on The Hoffman Show. It's the Hoffman Show. We're on the Team 980, always live as well on the free Odyssey app. Streaming live on YouTube, too, at the Team 980. Taking your calls, 301-230-0980. Josh Harris today saying, hey, the Commanders' name is here to stay. But at the same time, he did say we're going to try to honor our past and do a better job of that. It sounds like, I know Grant has reported on this, Grant Paulson over at 106.7 The Fan, that there's some uniform tweaks likely coming that might look kind of like the Joe Gibbs 1.0 era. So there are some changes that seem to be on the horizon with the branding of the team, perhaps as soon as this season. But the name, Commanders, this is it permanently in infamy.
We are the Commanders.
Because Doug Williams said so. Let's go to Clark in D.C. Clark, thanks for calling. Thanks for holding as well. You are on the Hoffman Show.
Thank you, Hoffman. I appreciate you, man. I appreciate it. No, I was calling in reference to the uniforms, all right? Nike do a great job with the uniforms. They very versatile. They switch them up. They got different colors. As long as they give us our burgundy and gold back, I don't care what the colors are. But, hey, I am a fan. I'm a Commanders fan. I don't care what they wear. Just give us our colors back, and I'll just let Nike do their magic, and which I know they will. That's all I ask. Thank you.
Yeah, you got it, Clark. Here's the thing about the uniforms, and I'm going to bring you in on this. I actually don't think that the uniforms that they currently have, the I'm going to air quotes, burgundy, the white, or the black ones are bad uniforms. The problem is they just don't feel like anything relative to Washington's history. It's like it's something totally different. Again, I kind of dig the W. I think that's cool. It's fine with me. Some people don't like it. Fine. It's definitely not exactly the right color of gold. Whatever that shade of red is not the classic Washington burgundy. And so if you're going to try to do it, then just do it correctly. And the thing is, I don't even dislike the black uniforms. And I know that I did laugh at Keith's call earlier when he was like, we look like the Steelers, and I get that. But, the Hail Mary happened in the black uniforms. That is, I kind of, there is a way to have an alternate black uniform that's new and different, but is probably less Steelery and more commandery, if you will. That would be sick. I just don't know that they've nailed that yet.
No, I mean, I would agree. The uniforms don't necessarily give, Washington,
They give something that Nike would make for high school teams. And they're really nice. They're really slick.
Yeah.
They're modern, cool, but it's not like this distinctive NFL brand. It's just tremendously generic.
Yeah, basic. Sort of, kind of. I don't mean to offend, the designer of our uniforms, but I think it's basic, and it just doesn't reflect. It doesn't give me Washington when I think of our franchise and the history, and it just doesn't give it at all. So I mean, I'm excited if we are to have some new uniforms. Even when I was trying to figure out what jersey I wanted to get, I got the burgundy one. I did want the black one because black does look cool. But I definitely wasn't gonna get a white jersey. I don't think the
white one is the most generic.
Yeah.
That one's just if you created a team, a literal new ass franchise in Madden, that's the white jersey. There's no distinctiveness that makes it anything other than, that's IMG Academy, a really rich high school that's got the best Nike jerseys that they offer. There's just nothing there. 301-230-0980 is the phone number. I'd be curious to know as they try to embrace some more of the past, if Native American imagery is on or off limits, and who they would talk to and how they would make that decision. Typically, I think it's probably been better to just avoid it, because then you avoid all of the other, all the discussions around it. You avoid the name discussion. You would avoid all that kind of stuff. I also get if you're like, no, this was our team for a long time, and that term is off limits for us, but as a way to kind of have a throwback, and we are actively doing work to help support indigenous people, whatever version of that makes it palatable with the right people and the corporate sponsors and, actual Native American and Indian folks, like whatever that is, like if that gets it back on the uniform and makes fans happy, like I think at this point I'm more open to that, and in part because I trust that, unlike when Dan Snyder would literally pay groups to propagandize BS, like I think Josh Harrison, his group, would actually do the work. And by the way, it's a diverse ownership group as is. I mean, Magic Johnson's a part of the group. I can't remember their names. I apologize, but like there's a Colombian family that is incredibly wealthy that is in this. Like you have people from different backgrounds influencing this in a way that is good and healthy. And so I do wonder like where that lands, or do you take this new W logo that has the Washington Monument in it and some other maybe potentially distinctively DC imagery, and do you just make it the proper burgundy color? Do you change the size? Do you find other accoutrements of Washington past and make that? Anthony, I'm guessing that was a no-go on that call.
Yeah, extreme no-go. I was trying to be patient, to be honest. I was trying to, really take in everything he was. It just wasn't getting his message wasn't getting across to me, and I'm scratching my head.
You're doing a great job screening calls.
Yeah,
not every call gets on the air. Your call has to be good. Anthony is the determinant of that. So whoever that was, sorry, got to do better. But that's it. That's it, because we got no one else on the line, and we got David Aldridge next. So we'll get David's thoughts on this. As someone who's been raised here and now been writing about the team for a long time, but obviously David made his Hall of Fame career covering the NBA, and it was a big weekend in the NBA. We'll talk to DA about the Luka Doncic trade as well next on the Hoffman Show. It's the Hoffman Show. We're on the Team 980. We are always live as well on the free Odyssey app. Hour number 2, 5 o'clock. It starts off, as always, with Not My Beat.
Today's top story from the perspective of someone who's there.
You are looking live.
This just in.
Not My Beat.
We got 2 top stories today. We have Josh Harris's press conference, and we have just a monster weekend in the NBA when it comes to transactions and trades. And, well, there are a few people I'd like to talk about either story with, other than David Aldridge, and he can talk about both. So, lo and behold, ladies and gentlemen, the Hall of Famer, David Aldridge, is with us. DA, happy Monday. How are you, sir?
I'm good. How are you?
I am doing well. Let's start local first, and then we can get to the Holy S trade, as you framed it, which with you going Holy S, that's a big trade with the Lakers and Luka Doncic. But the big story, the big news item, of course, that comes out of Josh Harris's press conference today is that he says the name Commanders is here to stay. There might be tweaks to other parts of the branding, but the name is here to stay. What was your reaction when you heard that at this point in the timeline and what that means for the franchise?
I mean, I wasn't surprised. They've been very consistent about it over the last year and a half. Really, since Josh Harris bought the team, he's been fairly consistent that he had no interest in changing the name. He wasn't going to really think seriously about changing the name. What he would say in the past is my priority is getting the stadium deal done, and I think that's still his priority. But he was fairly demonstrative and declarative today that he's not changing the name. And I don't know, Craig. I may be in my own bubble, but I still just don't believe that this is something that takes up the bandwidth of a sizable majority of fans of this team. I mean, I think they are much more interested in who's going to be the left tackle next year. You know what I mean? Like, this team is going places now, and I just don't think the name of the team really matters to that many people. I'm not saying it doesn't matter to anyone. I know there is a group of people for whom it matters very much, but at some point we have to move on from this. The name's been changed. It's not a great name, but they're not going to change it back and make all of those Jaden Daniels jerseys they just sold worthless, essentially, to some other name now. The name is the name, and either you want to root for this team or you don't because of the name. And if you don't want to root for the team because they're called the Commanders, okay, that's your call. I can't do anything about that. But I think you're going to be missing out on something pretty good the next few years.
Yeah, I totally agree. And for that reason, I'm glad that it's over. Like, I'm glad that they were definitive in a way that they haven't been in the past. And I thought it was interesting also when Josh, said, like, well, it's now it means something to people in the building. And you think about when Adam Peters talks about, what is a commander? Like, that now means something, where for a long time it didn't mean anything other than the stupid name that Dan Snyder picked. Was there anything else from that press conference that stood out to you, David? Obviously, the other most newsworthy thing is the stadium, although he was pretty coy about that. Was there anything else from Josh Harris today that stood out to you?
No, I had actually talked to him a week ago. Well, the week of the championship game, I was able to get him, and we covered most of that ground in that conversation. So none of it was especially new to me. I think it is instructive that while he's saying Maryland is still in the game, he is not hiding his preference for the RFK site. I think it's fair to say. I think it's clear that that's the site he wants to do the deal on. But as he mentioned, the city has to agree to that. And while he kind of ducked the question about whether he would pay for the stadium himself or ask for the city to help him, I mean, I don't think it's going to be difficult to get a whole lot of money commitment from the city. They just gave Ted Leonsis $500 million to fix or to renovate Capital One Arena, which they absolutely should have done, in my opinion, because, while I understand how important the Commanders are to the city, an NFL stadium is not open 200 plus nights a year like Capital One Arena is. That is a major economic engine for the city, for people that work there and people that live in the surrounding areas and restaurants and all of those things that are open 200 plus 300 nights a year because there's a game or there's a concert or there's an event. There's something going on at Capital One Arena that 15 to 20,000 people are attending. And you just can't, that does not happen with a football stadium. Yes, I know they can have the occasional concert there, and it'll be great to have Beyonce there, and it would be great to have a Final Four there, but that's still not, you don't get close to 100 nights a year with a football stadium. So even the most used football stadiums are not open 100 nights a year, you know, so, and that's still less than half of what Capital One is. So just making a decision as a city, you're going to opt for the one that's open more. So I think that to me is the crux of the matter. How much public funding does Josh Harris want, and how much public funding can he get from Washington or Maryland? I think Virginia's out. I don't get any sense that they're talking to or interested in Virginia as a realistic option at this point.
Yeah, it does seem that way. And I will say, David, good day in the Hoffman household when those Beyonce tour dates came out in Washington, D.C. She's not going many places with Cowboy Carter. And Washington, D.C. is one of them for 2 nights in July. So that's fun. It's also going to put a very exciting dent in my bank account when those tickets hit. But, yeah, hey, it's worth it. We all saw her on Netflix. Imagine what that's going to be live. Anyway, David Aldridge with us here on the Hoffman Show. All right, so to the NBA, David, and this trade between the Lakers and the Mavericks. And the general consensus seems to be, what the hell are the Mavericks doing, for a litany of reasons? So I'm going to ask you this. Is there any way that what Nico Harrison, the general manager of the Mavericks, did, and the way he went about all of this, actually works out in a way that a year from now, 2 years from now, we're like, man, all of us were wrong, he was right?
Well, if they win a championship, sure. I mean that's the only thing that would justify a trade, is if you win the whole thing, right? They were in the finals last year. So if the Mavericks make the finals and win, whether they, doesn't matter if they play or beat, and win the championship, then then you can say we made the deal that helped us win a championship. Anything short of that, it's a failure. It's a colossal failure, because you were already in the finals with Luka Doncic, who, whether or not he takes care of himself or is in great shape, well, if he was out of shape, the out of shape guy got you to the finals. You know what I mean? So,
right.
And is still one of the 5 best players in the league. So, the only thing that justifies the deal is winning an NBA championship, because you were already in the finals with him. The only thing you didn't do was finish it and win 2 more games. So, I think that's it. And that's what makes it a really perilous deal, because there's we won 57 games and we made the second round. No, we already did that with Luka. You already made conference finals with Luka. You made the NBA finals with Luka. So you got to do better than that to make this deal make any sense.
Well, and then even then, there is the question of, could you have won multiple with Luka, because he is that good, and the windows and the age frame.
I can't deal in hypotheticals. I can only deal in what I did, what's accomplished. And if they do win a ring, or they do win a title this year or next year, then you can say it was justified because we won. But if you don't, if you just get to the same level and you don't win, then that, to your point, would be like, well, you could do that. You could have done this with a much younger guy and had the same result. You only do this to achieve a different result. And that's the box they've put themselves in by making this deal.
So what was the most surprising element of this to you? There's so many options here, from, like, for the first time in his entire career, LeBron was completely unaware of something that was happening with his team, to the fact that apparently Danny Ainge, who was involved in the deal as one of the executives of the Utah Jazz, the third team in this deal, apparently did not know until 30 minutes prior that the deal that he was helping consummate what involved Luka Doncic and Anthony Davis. There is the general secrecy of this. There is the return that the Mavericks get. Like, what is the most surprising element of this deal to you?
I mean, I think it is I don't know. You don't know what's going on in that room, in that team. Like, whatever the rationale is, they decided they'd rather not be in the Luka Doncic business anymore. And okay, that's your call. But once you do that, you have to maximize the return. You have to maximize because he's one of the 5 best players in the league. If you don't ask for the moon and the stars for him, what are you going to ask the moon and the stars for? You know what I mean? So you can ask any team in the league for their best player for Luka Doncic. You can go to the Bucks and say, we want Giannis for Luka Doncic. And it's a fair ask. It's not an unfair ask. You can go to Denver and say, we want Jokic for Luka Doncic. It's not an unfair ask. Now, they may say no, but you're not wrong for asking because he's one of the 5 best players in the league. So you're not, so the fact that they didn't even ask anybody, they don't know what they could have gotten for him. Even if you want Anthony Davis, you still could do a deal where you get draft picks from one team and you get Anthony Davis from the Lakers. And you will still wind up with Anthony Davis. But now you got Anthony Davis and a whole bunch of picks. Why wouldn't you want that? So the fact that they, I know some people have said, well, you don't want Luka to be mad. Look, he's going to be mad when he finds out you're trying to trade him. Period. End of sentence. So, wouldn't you rather him be mad and get more out of that than him not knowing? And now he's mad at you for trading him and you got way less than you could have gotten? I'll say, live with him being mad at me. That's life in the big city. You make a decision like that, you got to live with the consequences.
Right. It just seems so inexplicable. This is a fun question, and perhaps you have gotten some texts from other GMs or executives or whatever. I'm sure that there's plenty of them that would have loved to be in the Luka Doncic market. What if he goes to market, if you will? What is the return? Anthony Davis and a first-round pick, it's not a bad return in most situations. Feels like an underpay for Luka Doncic. What do you think that, knowing that, how many first-round picks got traded for guys like Paul George and Kevin Durant and all these others through the years, what's the Luka Doncic return if they had taken this thing to market?
The Knicks just gave the Nets 5 first-round picks, control of 5 first-round picks for Mikal Bridges, who is a really good player. He's a really good player. He's not as good as Luka Doncic. You know what I mean? He just isn't. The Jazz got 5 players and 5 picks for Minnesota for Rudy Gobert, who is a great defensive player. He's great. And he got crossed over by Luka Doncic in the conference final for a dagger 3 to win a game in the conference finals last year. He's a terrific defensive player. He's a 4-time defensive player of the year?
Yep.
And he got pantsed by Luka Doncic in the playoffs. So what are we talking about? That's my point. Whatever you ask for him is reasonable. It's not unreasonable. And so that you wouldn't ask for that you would only focus on one team. And even with that team, you only got one of their 2 first-round picks that they have available. I don't care if they think Luka's going to walk. They're the ones getting Luka. That's their problem. That's not my problem. You know what I mean? So if I'm offering you Luka Doncic, I want both of those picks and I want some players. I want more players, and so because you're getting the best player in the deal. I'm taking less than what I already have. So you have to make that worth my while, not the other way around. So that's what it's just crazy to me that they wouldn't do that, and figure out a way to engage Brooklyn or OKC or one of these teams or Utah that's sitting on 100 draft picks over the next 5 years. I need some of those picks. I got to rebuild my team in 3 years. So I need future first round picks for Luka Doncic. And they got 1, which just is way not enough.
Right, and they got the one that's closer to now, which seems like a bad idea when Luka Doncic is about to turn 26 years old. At least give me the one where he's 33, not 31.
Right,
and I don't get that either.
It's weird.
Weird's one way to put it. David Aldridge.
The ask is, the weirdest thing is that the ownership. It's not that the basketball people did it. The owner said, "Yeah, do that." Okay, go ahead and do that.
Well,
why would you do that?
Do we think that the owner is actually? This is another part of the story, right? David is David Aldridge with this, of course, senior columnist for The Athletic here on the Hoffman Show. I don't know that that people that aren't as locked into the NBA realize Mark Cuban's not the owner in Dallas anymore. He sold
Correct.
the team a couple years ago.
No controlling interest, yes.
Yeah. He's still a minority partner, but he's not involved here. This is
Right,
someone
he's not
else
making the calls.
who is the governor now of the team.
Yep.
And not all the owners are super locked in. Like, how reflective is this of the new ownership in Dallas that may not be paying attention, that their basketball person came to them and said, this is the deal, and they just went, sure, okay, trade Luka Doncic for that.
I don't think I'm breaking any news to say that Miriam Adelson is not paying attention to the NBA on a daily basis. I'm pretty sure she's not. So the only thing that I can surmise, and it's not based on any intel, is that when they talked about this deal, the idea of, all right, if we keep Luka Doncic, we have to give him a supermax contract next year to make sure that he doesn't bolt and go anywhere else. We have to give him a supermax deal for $345 million. We have to pay him $70 million a year, basically, for 5 years to keep him going forward. And at that point, I could see an owner, I could see Miriam Adelson and the family going, we don't want to pay that much money for anybody. And even if you say, but he's one of the 5 best players in the league, you can philosophically say, I'm just not going to pay a basketball player, however good they are, $70 million a year. I just do not think that any one player is worth that. That's a choice. And it's okay. They own the team, Craig. They can decide whatever they want about who they're going to pay. But I think you should come out and say that. This is what I always say about owners. You can decide whatever you want, but you have to come out and explain to the people that you are asking to pay for season tickets and for parking and for food and for booze why you're doing that, why Luka Doncic is no longer in this building. You have to explain it to them if that is your call and live with the consequences of that. And that's where I have problems with ownership in pro sports, because they hide. They make decisions and they don't come out and say, this is why I'm doing it. And you can hate me if you want, but that's why I'm doing it. And that's the only thing that even begins to make sense to me about this trade. Like, whatever, unless you have catastrophic medical information about Luka Doncic, like his knee is about to turn to putty and he can't play more than another year or two. Like, if you have that, like, okay, you should tell the other team that, but if that's your call. But I don't think that's it. So I'm guessing, and that the supermax is the only thing that makes sense. It's the only rationale to me that makes any sense at all. That they just didn't want to pay that. They just thought that's not something that we want to do, even for Luka Doncic.
Right. And at which point, like, why own a basketball team? Like, the whole point is to get a guy like Luka Doncic,
Exactly.
which part of the deal is you have to pay him that much money.
You got to pay him. You
Right.
got to pay him. I hate this is baseball people drive me crazy with this.
Yeah.
He's a great player. He's a great player. He's a great player. Yeah, okay, now I'm a free agent. Pay me what they're worth. I can't pay you that much. I'll destroy the balance of my team. Like, it's crazy. Like, when do I get paid what I'm worth in baseball? Like, I'm a great player. Pay me what I'm worth.
Right.
And that never happens in baseball.
And in basketball, you don't have to deal with it because they have the supermax. They artificially limit the value of the players. Meanwhile, on the other side of this trade, last thing for you, DA, is David Aldridge is with us from The Athletic, of course, here on the Hoffman Show. The Lakers side of this, how does this play out on two fronts? One, like, what's the actual basketball implication here for the Lakers, assuming that Luka gets this calf injury figured out and he and LeBron get some time under their belts and they get to go into the playoffs with Luka Doncic and LeBron James on the same basketball team? And then what does this mean for LeBron's relationship with the Lakers moving forward, where he's got some contract stuff that he's got to figure out, and he's LeBron freaking James and was not told about this deal ahead of time before one of his best friends and someone who shares an agent. By the way, the agency I can't say he owns it because he doesn't, but his best friend does. That gets traded here.
I don't think, that part of it I don't think matters at all. Like, it's not like it traded them, to, well, I'm not going to say the Wizards. That's a low blow. It's not like it traded him to Charlotte.
Well,
you know what I mean? Like, they traded him to a really good team. He has a chance to win a championship. He'll be fine. And look, the Lakers deal in superstars in decades. They don't deal in year to year. They don't particularly care about this year. I mean, they have to make trades to try and be competitive. But the point is they now have a future. They now have a path forward with a 25-year-old superstar to build around. And so, LeBron is on a year-to-year thing. He decides whether he wants to play another year, and then he tells everybody. So he can, LeBron's MO has been to continue to ask, and rightly so, by the way, for the absolute maximum amount because he's worth it, and he's been worth it for 20 years. He's LeBron James. Now he could take less, if he wants to help in roster building and stuff like that. I mean, he could take less. So we'll see what he does with that. I'm not worried about this year. They're two great players. Great players figure out how to play with each other if they care at all about winning, and they'll figure out a way to maximize both of their skill sets. They don't have enough left. They don't have enough around them to make a real run this year, I don't think, as good as they both still are. But they're not worried about this year. They're worried about the next 6 or 7 years, that they'll have an opportunity to really put a championship level team around a great dynamic young player. Now, Luka's not for everybody because he pounds the ball, pounds it. So everybody don't want to play with him and stand in the corner and wait. But there's enough good players that would be willing to do it because he's that good and he does pass the ball. He's not selfish. And they can put enough players. It will take them a couple of years, but in 2027 or so, they should be pretty good. I would think they'd be pretty good with Luka being the focal point of that franchise going forward.
Knowing LeBron like you do and having watched him work for 20 years, do you think that this has a significant impact on Luka's career, getting to watch LeBron go about his business every day? Let's say it's even for the rest of this year. Let's say LeBron after this year is like, I'm going to go play somewhere else because I don't feel like doing this and the Lakers are annoying me, or whatever he wants to do. He wants to go back to Cleveland one more time, whatever he wants to do. Does the months that Luka gets to spend with LeBron, watching him work the way that he does, like materially change the trajectory potentially of his career if some of the conditioning concerns or whatever are potentially true?
You'd like to think that somebody would see the example of, one of the 2 or 3 greatest players in the history of basketball and see what LeBron does in terms of keeping his body right and being on top of his physical conditioning, to an incredible degree, and go, well, maybe I should start doing some of that. Like, you don't have to do everything LeBron does. You don't have to mimic him, but you can at least go, okay, I need to, I'm 7 years in the league. I need to start being more conscientious about my body, right? And how I get ready for a season and how I get through a season and all of those things. So you'd like to think that a smart guy would look at that and go, I should start doing that. I should start emulating that. I should start being more serious about this. But doesn't mean he will, right? Doesn't mean he will. He could say, I just got to the finals in the body that I'm in, right? And so, I'd like to think he would, but no guarantees. LeBron's not for everybody, right? Like, everybody's not for everybody. Like, there's people that aren't going to be as maniacal as LeBron is about staying in shape. Not going to be as crazy as Steph Curry is about staying in shape. That's why they're the players that they are, because they are maniacal. That's why Brady played till he was 45, because he was insane about his body. But that's not for everybody, including great players, including Hall of Fame players. It's not for everybody. So you'd like to think they would do it, but that doesn't mean they will.
I guess we'll find out. David Aldridge, senior columnist at The Athletic. You can read his coverage not only of everything going on in the NBA, but everything going on in DC sports there. DA, always appreciate your time here on the show, and I'm sure I'll see you down the road.
Thanks, Greg. Appreciate it. That's
David Aldridge with us, the Hall of Famer here on the Hoffman Show. Man, that was funny, Anthony, listening. The Athletic did an emergency podcast, their NBA Daily podcast, and they were just like, when David Aldridge says, I don't get surprised by anything, but this was a holy yes moment, that's when you know, like, a trade has gone to the next level. And speaking of, like, the notoriety of this trade, do you watch the Grammys last night?
I did indeed.
Trevor Noah and Jim Gaffigan made a Luka Doncic trade joke in the Grammys. In the Grammys! That's how big of a cultural moment this trade was. So, talk about a massive, massive deal. The NFL could have a massive, massive deal coming as well. Myles Garrett has requested out in Cleveland. We will talk about that later this hour, but I want to talk about the Luka trade. So Anthony and I will chop it up about that, give our own 2 cents next here on The Hoffman Show. It's the Hoffman Show. We're on the Team 980, always live as well on the free Odyssey app. We are streaming live on YouTube too at the Team 980. So this weekend, I go to bed Saturday night, I believe it was Saturday night. Wake up Sunday morning, and I have what seems to be a patently absurd text thread that is greeting me, because at like 11 something the night before, my friend Alex had texted the group thread that is me, Orioles announcer Kevin Brown, and himself. The three of us go way back to Syracuse State. I've mentioned this group chat on the air before. And it's the original Shams tweet that says Anthony Davis has been traded to the Mavericks for Luka Doncic. More specifically, Luka Doncic has been traded to the Lakers for Anthony Davis. And then Kevin, I presume after he gets done calling some college basketball game somewhere at 2 a.m, responded saying he had to be hacked, right? And then I wake up at 7:30 on Sunday morning because I can't sleep in, and I just go, I'm sorry, what happened? And that's how I found out about the trade. Anthony, how did you find out about the trade that shook up your favorite team?
So I was actually with Zaire.
That's right, because you were at the Pro Bowl games this weekend.
Yeah. I was with him, a couple of other, football players. And
I'm going to be invasive. Were you with known NBA superfan Bobby Wagner at the time?
I was. So that happens, and Zaire's like, bro, why are you on your phone, bro? I'm like, bro, there was a nuke that just exploded, bro. You don't know anything about it. Like, that's why. And then literally, like, Bobby's tapping him on the shoulder, and like everybody else is like, yo, what? And then the DJ announces that Luka had been traded for AD, and everybody's like, what? It was crazy. Like, everybody was just so confused.
Some of the videos that are out there are amazing. Brad Beal and Kevin Durant finding out on the Minnesota bench. I think there was the Jazz players that found out. I think that was one video that was going around. I saw some video from, like, a party in Dallas, and it's just, like, a bunch of rich white kids, like, hanging out at a pool, and everyone just is going, no! Like, distraught at this party in Dallas. Like, it was, I had a buddy of mine, because I used to, obviously live and work down there, which I'll get into in a second, like why this trade is so shocking. There's so many reasons. But like, I had buddies texting me being like, this is insane. My buddy Jared Sandler, who helps call the Rangers games on radio down there and is just an enormous Mavs fan. Jared's wife got him cupcakes on Sunday that said, I'm sorry about Luka, because he was so distraught. Like, I don't know that there's an athlete currently in the DMV that would have the reaction that they had outside of if the Commanders traded Jaden Daniels. Like, truly, that is the only parallel I can like, even someone like Terry. Like, Terry's now 30, whatever. Like, I would be distraught if they traded Terry. That would be an insane thing to do. But if they got someone, I don't know, it's such a hard one because Terry is 30, right? Like, Luka's 25, turns 26. Jaden, I mean, hilariously, he's not that much older than Jaden Daniels. Like, truly, the analogy works in part because Jaden will turn 25 sometime in the next 12 months, I believe. I believe Jaden's 24 currently. So, like, we are talking about a young superstar, like the kind of superstar that you spend your entire life trying to get. And the Mavs were lucky enough to luck into 2 in a row. They had Dirk for the better part of a decade, and Dirk was kind of, flirting with that line. Obviously, was an MVP back in 2006. In 2011, they win the championship. And then on the downside of Dirk's career, Luka comes in, and they're able to pull off that trade with Atlanta to trade up to get him in the draft because they realize that he's that special. And they freaking trade that guy away. And I think it's especially jarring for so many reasons. And before you even get into some of the details of how it went down, but you just have to start with the fact that the Dallas Mavericks lost in the NBA Finals last year to the Boston Celtics, right? Think of who the Boston Celtics are right now. Who are they built around?
Jason Tatum, Jaylen Brown.
Specifically Tatum, though, right?
Yeah.
Like, Brown's incredible. And if Dallas had a Jaylen Brown piece, maybe this is a different conversation. But mainly Jason Tatum. And there have been stories for years about do they need to break up Tatum and Brown. Do they need to trade Jason Tatum? Do they need to trade Jaylen Brown? Like, what do you do? And the Celtics just said, we are not going to get better by trading these two guys. We are going to continue to chip away around them until we find the right pieces to win a championship. Because we've done the hard part. We got specifically Jason Tatum. Jaylen Brown is awesome. I'm not trying to take away from Jaylen. But Jaylen's not a top 5 player in the league. Jaylen's a top 15 player in the league, probably. Maybe top 20. But certainly he's like the best number 2 in the league. Right? So if you've got the thing that's hard, the Wizards are the Wizards right now because they are as far away from possible as having that guy. Like, I don't say that to be mean. I say that to say, like, part of the reason that the Wizards are in the situation they are is they didn't even manage their assets right of not having that guy. Like, the closest they had to it was Brad, and they should have traded him for a better chance to get someone like a Luka and take a flyer on a younger player like that and hope that it panned out better than he had panned out once it was clear that, like, Brad was not going to turn into a top 5 player in the league, and they didn't do that. And instead, they wound up giving him the no-trade clause and blah, blah, blah. And, like, that's how the Wizards are the Wizards. We talked about that on Friday. So the Wizards now are going all in on the only route they have to getting one of those guys, which is the draft. And so the Mavericks had one. And Anthony Davis might have been one at one point in his career. And at his absolute peak, probably still is one, but he's not consistent enough to be considered one. It's not just how good is you're good, it's how consistently are you that. And they traded away the 25-year-old top 5 player, which is literally the hardest thing to get in the sport. And they did it because they lost in the finals to a team who decided to not do that when a lot of people were pushing them to, because they realized that was a stupid thing to do. And they had done the hard part, and they needed to do the other parts around. That doesn't make any sense. And, by the way, this is the franchise that went through this same thing with Dirk in the mid-2000s and did not give up on Dirk because they knew that the hardest thing to do would be replace Dirk. And so they kept building around him until they finally won the championship. They probably should have done some stuff after that instead of trying to run it back. But it's hard to fault them for trying to run it back when they won the championship and they re-signing Tyson Chandler and doing all the things the Mavs did, which was a discussion forever when I worked down there because it was a lot closer to when that had happened. But they kept chasing it because they're like, we have Dirk, we must maximize Dirk. And instead of being like, how do we fit in more pieces one at a time around Luka to win a championship, they're like, let's punt on that and try something else. That is asinine behavior.
Yeah, I mean, how much of the off-the-court drama sort of kind of do you think, like, went into it? Just because, like, you know, always reports Luka's out of shape, not conditioning, things of that. Aside from that, I don't really care about that because when he's on the court, he's super productive. They're going out there scoring. And, again, they were just in the finals. To me, that says something about your
organization. If you can't get a guy to get in the gym and get in shape and find a way to coach him and connect with him, then you have the wrong coach, the wrong GM, the wrong people.
Mm-hmm.
Like, yes, your scouting and who the player is matters. And if that is a legitimate problem with Luka, like, that's something Luka needs to work on. But I have a hard time believing that because Luka's been relatively durable until this season, and he just got you to the finals last year. And if you've killed his passion for the game to a point that he's not doing the things he needs to do, that is reflective of you as an organization. Whatever Jason Kidd is doing, and there's been other people that have clashed with Jason Kidd throughout his life and career for sure, and Nico Harrison seems to be a very interesting character. This is the same guy who, when he was a Nike executive, by the way, headed up the crew that botched the Steph Curry presentation that led to Steph signing with Under Armour. So, great history that Nico Harrison has. Like, it's wild. And then you get into the fact that they're like, well, defense wins championships. And it's like, okay, that's what you're going to take out of this. And by the way, well, here's why that one falls short. Same dude, same organization, same front office that traded for Kyrie Irving 2 years ago. Now you decided defense wins championships and that Luka's the problem in that front? Like, every stone, and then not maximizing the value, like the secretive nature of it. At no point did the process reflect good organization. And I think that's the thing that just like irks me when you have someone like Luka who's so special as a player and it was so beloved in the community. You built everything on your team around him, and to betray your fans like that with process that's this bad. And if you sincerely think like we can't win with this dude, his head is not on straight, whatever, then you owe it to your fans to come out, say that, and to say we don't think we can win with him, but we tried everything we could, and then we ultimately sold him at the highest possible value. And they didn't even do that. Bad deal, bad process, bad everything, incredibly stupid, which is why they're getting crushed, and they should. And yet still, they do have Anthony Davis and Kyrie Irving. If those dudes get hot for 6 weeks in May and June, then could they win a championship? I guess they could, because those dudes are that good. But I don't know that those dudes are that good anymore. Kyrie in the finals last year was pretty brutal. So, TBD. Going to be an interesting couple of weeks. We haven't even talked about the Lakers side. Maybe we'll get to that tomorrow. It's the Hoffman Show. We're on the Team 980. Dave Johnson joins us live next. It's the Hoffman Show. We are on the Team 980, always live as well on the free Odyssey app, streaming live on YouTube as well at the Team 980. Dave Johnson with us. Dave, it seems like 16 is a magic number. I don't think that any Wizards fan wants to see 16 anymore, but what is it about these 16-game losing streaks where, hey, that 17th game, you better bet on the Wizards. Big win over the weekend to get that done.
Well, no, indeed. And you know what? Although I was talking to somebody about that, I mean, let's say we lost 17. I mean, at the end of the day, the validation of what this team is doing is that Alex Sarr, Bilal Coulibaly, Bob Carrington are in the Rising Stars game. If this team was losing and you couldn't point to players that are developing, then that'd be a problem. But also, yes, this team every night does want to win. I know that now the Arcana would be like, what is Dave drinking? They just lost 16 in a row. They give it their all every night. But on Saturday, and let's be frank, it helped that Anthony Edwards was not part of the equation for Minnesota because they played Minnesota competitive the last game against the Timberwolves at home. But then Anthony, Edwards turned around and had 20 of his 41 points in the fourth quarter. But plays we're highlighting in the pregame, Bilal Coulibaly, a chase down LeBron-like dunk. Rashawn Holmes looked like he was going to dislocate his elbow diving for a loose ball to force a jump ball in the fourth quarter, like it was the NBA Finals. So, these are guys, and this is what we said at the start of the season, whether it's Rashawn Holmes, fighting for their NBA life, let's face it, or whether you're one of the young players who's fighting to get some identity in the NBA. And so that's the way they go at it each and every night. It's tough when you go to the next day and say, wow, that's 16 in a row.
For sure. And it helps that that Malcolm Brogdon was back and, you had these, I think, longer stretches where you had some of the veterans on the floor and just playing a higher caliber of basketball. What do you think that those moments, because there's still obviously, even in those moments where you maybe have 3 to 4 vets on the floor instead of just one, what do those moments mean to the young guys to kind of be a part of a more experienced ecosystem in this season of development?
No, you hit the nail on the head with Malcolm Brogdon. He had missed 14 games, and, no coincidence that, 14 of those games, there were losses. And so, like, you have a Jordan Poole on the floor, that's one thing, but then you don't have an experienced a backup. So, that's why, Jared Butler has been effective and been a spark at times, but he's still a young player. So Malcolm Brogdon just brings another level that, Glenn Consor explains probably better than I do because he was a former point guard. It's a certain organization and calmness. And when I say organization, it's not even, it's not that he's shouting instructions, you go there, because it's a 24-second clock. But there's just something about, we noticed it Saturday, it's a team that is more organized on offense when it gets stuck in a half-court situation. I shouldn't say stuck, but when it's in a half-court situation. And as a result of that, then it can play better defense. In other words, if you're chaotic and scrambled on offense, chances are it's going to lead to bad defense. So it actually impacts both ends of the floor.
Dave Johnson with us here on the Hoffman Show. Wizards and Hornets tonight. Dave, real quick before we let you go, obviously the news of the weekend in the NBA. I assume that you're not going to Joe Mazzulla me here and be like, I don't care about the trades. Don't ask me about them. But the big trade that goes down Saturday night between the Lakers and the Mavericks with Luka Doncic. I'm curious how you found out because, I mean, clearly the Wizards breaking the losing streak. That was going to be the biggest story of the night in the league, and it wasn't because this trade happened. So where were you guys as a team / where were you when you found out, and what was your reaction?
Well, it's interesting because the time change. We were in Minnesota, and I just went down to grab my patented post-game Caesar salad with salmon, and all of a sudden I see it on social media, and it's one of those things where you think, well, wait a minute, am I reading this right? Is this? Yeah, because you see all kinds of proposals, even when it's not on social media, you say so and so is speculating or talking, and then it's one of those things. Everybody was doing a double take and trying to. Am I reading this right? Because it's when I've said this before to you that often trades that happen are the ones we don't hear about because they're the ones that are not speculated by agents or for various reasons. But I didn't mean it to this extreme. I don't think anybody obviously saw this coming. I mean, the fact that Dallas gets away from the Supermax situation, but yet Dallas has got lots of money. So it just came out of the blue. We were just in Dallas, as you know, a week ago. In fact, we were in Dallas, and there was not one murmur about the Luka Doncic era is over with Dallas. So to say everyone was floored would be an understatement.
Yeah, to say the least. I mean, I think my favorite piece of reporting in terms of the level of secrecy here that's come out, Dave, was Danny Ainge and the Utah Jazz, who were the third team into this deal, did not know that part of the deal they were in was Anthony Davis for Luka Doncic. That's how secretive it was until like an hour before it went down. It's just like, yeah, we're doing this trade. Here's what you would get. And there's some picks involved. Is this good for you? And they're like, yeah, sure. Well, let us know when you're ready to call it in. And then all of a sudden, bang, Danny Ainge finds out, hey, former Celtic great Danny Ainge, you're a part of trading Luka Doncic to the Lakers.
Right. Yeah. Well, and if I understood it correctly, Jason Kidd, the coach of the Celtics, the coach of the Mavericks, didn't even know about it.
Correct.
So,
yeah.
I mean, you talk about keeping it hush-hush. I mean, that's not something where you say the GM says, well, I just sent some guy to the G League or what. I mean, I just changed the franchise, and apparently it triggered protests in Dallas and all kinds of stuff. So yeah, it's earth shattering, and as we know, when it's earth shattering, it somehow usually involves the Lakers.
That has been the history. It was, I think, like 11 years or something to the day of the Pau Gasol trade, which is another fun bit of history as well. Of course, we'll keep an eye on everything going on with the Wizards this week. I'm sure Will Dawkins is fielding a zillion phone calls, and so if something happens, we'll be talking about it with Dave. In the meantime, we get to just listen to the sweet, dulcet tones of Dave Johnson calling basketball. Wizards and Hornets tonight here on the Team 980 pregame, less than an hour from right now at 6:45. Dave, have a great call, and we will talk to you later in the week, my friend. Thank you as always.
Well, I'll try to be sweet and dulcet tonight. Thank you.
That is Dave Johnson, the legendary play-by-play man of the Washington Wizards, here on your home for Wizards basketball, the Team 980. Big day for the Commanders today with Josh Harris stepping to the podium. A year-end press conference from the owner. Yes. Oh, what a fun thing that actually happened. That hasn't happened for 30 years. Josh Harris, you'll hear the most important things that he had to say. Yeah, we're busting it out. It's a pick six at 6 on a Monday. The top Commanders storylines of the day next on the Hoffman Show. It's the Hoffman Show. Final hour, final 45, really, here on the Team 980 because, well, coming up at 6:45, pregame, Wizards and Hornets here on the Team 980, which is why we just talked to Dave Johnson. But right now, it is 6 o'clock, which who knows what's going to happen at 6 o'clock from now moving forward, because we're not going to have a Commanders storylines on the regular, except for today, because Josh Harris gave a press conference earlier, and we're going to get you caught up right here, right now, with a pick six at 6.
The 6 biggest Commander storylines.
It is caught!
Delivered at 6 o'clock sharp. It's the pick 6 at 6.
We set out to find a leader, someone who could take this franchise to the next level and build an elite team that consistently competes for championships.
Top Commanders headlines of the day. Definitely no one bigger than this.
Number 1.
Josh Harris says the Commanders' name is here to stay. Here was the first question of the press conference from ESPN's John Keim. He asked him about the name, the branding, and then we'll also play for you a much more direct follow-up that really puts any doubt in the dirt.
Yeah, so just to hit the name first, like we're focused on, we're back to saying, you know, what we said all last year, which was focused on winning football games, on getting prepared for next year, on fixing up Ashburn and the stadium. We could talk about that. And then on engaging with the community of Washington. And so right now, and now in this building, the name Commanders means something. It means that, it's about players who, are love football, are great at football, hit hard, mentally tough, great teammates. And so it's really meaningful that name is growing in meaning. And so, but as far as rebranding and bringing our past, which obviously I grew up with, and all the Super Bowl championships and our future together, you're going to see us head back towards, honoring our past and bringing it together with
Bringing it together with the future was how that ended up. And I think there's a lot in there that is substantive. First and foremost, the idea that, okay, yeah, we're open to something here. We're open to trying to figure out some ways to honor our past is, I think, significant. And I expect that the uniform reporting that Grant Paulson and others have done is probably the big thing there. I also think it is substantive that Josh Harris specifically mentions that the name Commanders now does have some meaning. It means something to people in the building. And I would say specifically, it means something to Adam Peters. Adam Peters was the one who came up with the Commanders tag and all of that stuff that we saw coming out of the draft last year. So it used to be that Commanders didn't mean anything. And now that they made an NFC Championship game, something they didn't do in the final 30 years under their previous names, between Washington football team and obviously the old moniker, there is a meaning here. And it has a definition in their building that they're proud of, which is why when Steve Wino followed up later, Harris was even more definitive.
Josh, Steve Weiner from the Associated Press. Following up on John's question earlier, is it safe to say the Commander's name is around just to stay? Is that safe to say from your standpoint?
Yes. And we're actually, I think it's now being embraced by our team, by our culture, by our coaching staff. And so, we're going with that.
We're going with that. Didn't really leave a whole lot of room to wiggle there. So that is the biggest news story of the day. I gave my full take, reaction, whole deal off the top of the show at 4 o'clock. If you missed it, it'll be up on YouTube a little bit later. And of course, it's already because Anthony works very quickly in the Hoffman Show podcast feed. So you can search the Hoffman Show wherever you get your podcasts or rewind in the Odyssey app to 4 o'clock and you can hear my full take on it. But short version, I'm glad that we at least know whether they're going to embark on a rebrand and we know that it's coming, or that the door is closed. The most important thing is that we are now out of limbo, and thank God for that.
Number 2.
The other most newsworthy items of the day were all stadium adjacent. We're going to attack those in total in the second half of our Pick 6 at 6. But Harris was also asked to just simply reflect on the season. What did this magical year mean to him as the owner, and did he see it coming?
Look, I knew we were going to go to. No, I'd say I predicted. No, look. Obviously, the season came out amazing and better than anyone expected, and no one could have sat where we were all sitting at the beginning of the season, where we had entirely, for the most part, a new coaching staff, a new front office. More than half the players were changed, but obviously. Credit to Adam and Dan and their staffs for bringing everyone together, and credit to the players for making it happen on the field. And so, look, we got it. We've arrived, and that changes expectations. And I've lived through this before, and we welcome it. And we're just going to work harder and to create a situation where next year we win.
And that's the thing about Harris. This part is not new to him. When he took on the Philadelphia 76ers, they made some significant jumps. They obviously had the process stuff, but eventually they got there. The Devils, when he took them over, they've been pretty successful where Josh Harris has been. He just hasn't crossed that final threshold yet. This part he's good at. The question is, can he, and certainly the people under him that are really running the franchise, can they get this team to where he has not been before, which is to win a championship? And I definitely think he has the right people in place. He talked about in this press conference how he feels really comfortable and confident with the people he has running the franchise. He knows enough to ask questions, but he also knows that his place is to merely ask questions, and that ultimately he's going to live with Adam Peters' answers. And when he's no longer happy with Adam Peters' answers, then, well, he hires someone else. But certainly doesn't appear that's going to be happening anytime soon. What's he most proud of this season? Here's Josh Harris again.
What I'm most proud of, obviously, there's a lot, honestly, that I'm proud of. But first of all, the leadership. I think I made the right leadership choices. And, Mark Klaus now in the building, in the business. We're going to be a lead on the business side. But I really feel like, as I said to you then, my most important 3 jobs were picking a coach, picking a GM, and then picking someone to lead the business. And I feel great about where we are and the leadership we have in place. Secondly, I feel super proud, obviously, of how excited and happy the Washington community is and the reawakening of Washington football. And that's everything from how we played on the field and what we did on the field. And really, obviously we won 4 games last year, and to be going to the NFC Championship, how can you not be proud of that? I'm very proud of that and very appreciative of the players and everyone who was involved in that. But also, listen, I wandered around. I made it a point of meeting a lot of fans in the stadium, outside of the stadium, and people are super happy here. And, people were literally crying in bars, and, grown men, grown women, and it's really helped the happiness and the excitement. And there's very few things in the DMV that unites the whole DMV, and the Washington Commanders is front of the list. And so that's probably the thing I feel most proud about, that people here are appreciative of Washington football again, I felt when I was growing up. And so let's keep it going.
And that is the plan with Jaden Daniels at the helm. Helps to have that guy. I think the other thing that Harris can certainly be proud of is the way they went about their business. This is a team that was very easy to root for, and the people that he put in place and the people they put in place certainly made that the case.
Number 3.
Josh Harris obviously asked about the stadium, which we'll get to in a second, but also just in general, the new developments on what could be happening elsewhere in Command Land, specifically in Ashburn. Any plans to upgrade the facility out there? Here's Harris.
Yeah, so first of all, we're going to do a lot of things in the offseason to make players' lives better, to make coaches' lives better, to make front office lives better, and obviously, whether it's the wet area, the weight room, our indoor facility, you're going to see a lot of changes here, and you're going to see a lot of changes in the stadium. We're going to continue to build on the $75 million we had earmarked. So that'll be north of 100. We got a whole bunch of plans to help the premium areas, to continue to build infrastructure and to continue to make the upper deck better. I mean, a lot of stuff. And so, but here, really, we're going to focus right now on the stadium itself. And, and I think the players like to be here. Coaches like to be here. That's not to say that we won't revisit it over time, but we're focused on fixing this place up right now. We're certainly, going to look at that. But like right now, the big project is the stadium. And, and so right now we're going to spend a lot of money trying to make this place better for the people that work, live, and play.
So there's Josh Harris on everything but the stadium. You will hear his thoughts on the stadium and his responses to the questions about it next in today's Pick 6. But first, let's get an update on the latest in the world of women's sports presented by Wawa. Chicken how you want it at Wawa with customizable crispy or roasted chicken sandwiches. It's the Hoffman Show. We're on the Team 980, always live as well on the free Odyssey app. Streaming live on YouTube, too, at the Team 980. Let's pick up with our pick 6 at 6 and let you hear what Josh Harris had to say about the pursuit of a new stadium for the Washington Commanders. It is a pursuit that is long coming, and one that frankly predates Harris's role as owner, but one that he has taken to a new level as they got the RFK land returned to D.C., and now they can see whether D.C. wants to play ball with them. Maryland's still involved, but let's hear what Harris had to say about it.
Number 4.
So, picking up with our pick 6, what does Josh Harris envision for a new stadium? Has he thought about this? Like, where is he at on the widest possible terms?
Yeah, so I have 3 or 4 things in mind. I mean, obviously, for me personally, I grew up with a great stadium, and I understand, what it's like to play in a stadium that, where it's hard for the visiting team to play, right? I mean, we've experienced different stadiums. Like I said, I've been to every game for the last 2 years, and I see differences. And so, the primary objective is to create a stadium that we're going to win in, because I think if we do that, and so there's all kinds of decisions that go into that. But I also think that we have a responsibility. When a city, takes land and utilizes it, for a stadium, right? They're taking it away from other things they could do, and so it's our responsibility to make it, an amazing economic development opportunity for where it is, and create a lot of jobs, and help that area, right? And so as I think everyone knows, we're considering multiple jurisdictions, but in each case, right, those areas need help, need improvement, and so that's got to be part of it. And the cities themselves have to have their own input as to what they want. These are political processes, right? And they matter to the neighborhoods and to the greater areas. So we're, right now in the middle of all that. And so, I think it's both. But for me personally, I start with, we need to have a great place where our fans can show up and feel like, and as much as possible, we want that to be an advantage to our team in terms of winning on the field.
So, long-winded answer. First all, it feels like a good football facility is going to be the priority. Second, how do they make money and give the fans a good experience and all those kinds of things that you always consider. And third, but maybe not in that order, does it work for the city? They want to be good partners, and I don't think that's lip service. I think they genuinely want to create a space that is more than just a football stadium. And if you saw the video that was floating around last week of how this could potentially look, I don't know if that was something the Commanders were involved in at all, but you see like the green space in front of the stadium and the shops and the apartments, and you kind of see the vision for it, and you're like, oh, this is cool. This is dope. If this is what this is going to look like, sign me up. In terms of an RFK deal, or frankly, if they could do the same thing in Landover and do a way better job than just, hey, here's a stadium that's a pain in the ass to get to and a parking lot that sucks and just a pain for everyone around the neighborhood, then that feels like a potential good use of what's currently in Landover. I would also not sleep on them eventually moving the practice facility. I think they like Ashburn, but as they think about how do we make things right in Landover, if we leave Maryland behind, I could see them going out there, which is something to keep in mind, although Harris hasn't said that at all. Harris, in fact, is not saying anything specific about any of these jurisdictions, which is smart business. Asked, does he still see D.C. as the most politically viable?
Yeah, look, I think that obviously the DMV, right, is 3 jurisdictions, and it turns out D.C.'s in the middle. Plus, it's the location maybe, but plus because of the history, it's location that when we do surveys is the most acceptable. But there's a lot of things that go into this, and we play in Maryland right now. We have an amazing relationship with Maryland, and like I said, it's not just our decision. Like the decision is about the specific regions and areas and states themselves and DC itself. So like we have a lot of dialogue going with everyone, and we're going to keep pushing forward. That I continue to kind of just be transparent about what the surveys say and how the area feels at large. But that doesn't mean that there's not a lot of support in Maryland, a lot of support in Virginia. There is. But obviously D.C. is, kind of aligned with the history and happens to be the easiest place to get to for the most number of fans.
And that's the thing about the Virginia and Maryland sides of this, too. If you're in Virginia, let's say you are in kind of that 267 corridor, the stadium being in the Alexandria area or National Harbor, or on the Virginia side, I should say, of National Harbor, kind of the other side of the Woodrow Wilson Bridge, which is one of the areas that's been talked about, that doesn't really help you that much. Getting there is terrible. If you are in Bethesda and the stadium is going to be at National Harbor, that also is terrible. Now, Maryland at this point is going to be Landover probably or bust, and it's kind of down to Landover and RFK. I don't think any of the other sites are in. But again, like depending on where you are in Maryland, getting to RFK might just be a better deal for you than getting to Landover. Driving on the Beltway is not exactly super fun. And if you're somewhere that's close to a metro stop and like you'd rather get to the game that way and not deal with traffic, like you're going to have people in Virginia, people in Maryland that are like, I don't want it in my state. Frankly, you're also going to have a lot of people in D.C. that are like, I don't want to pay the taxes. Like, put it somewhere else. I want to go to the games, but like, I don't want to pay for it. So this is the conundrum and some of the ways in which the data itself gets messy. But winning helps. People are willing to support a team and be more accepting of a team that's winning.
Number 5.
So Harris was asked directly, how does the success this season change the timeline here?
Yeah, look, any time that you win on the field, I mean, we all now experienced what it was like here, right? And it was the reawakening of watching football here in the DMV and everywhere, right? Because there's lots of people who grew up with the team that I grew up with, and so anytime that you get that reawakening, right, the population at large is supportive, right? And so there's no question that there's some momentum, and we would hope to capitalize on it. But I mean, obviously, we're in dialogue with jurisdictions, with Washington, with Maryland, and really they're what they want to do is a big part of it also. And so And every indication is that everyone is supportive, and so we're just going to try to move it forward as fast as possible.
I think what it does is it changes the political calculus. Being mean to the Commanders used to be good politics. Being mean to Dan Snyder used to be good politics. Now, if you're not getting along with Josh Harris and you're the impediment to Jaden Daniels playing where folks want Jaden Daniels to play, that changes the politics of it. So I do think that you're going to see some movement in the numbers as more people are more excited about not giving Dan Snyder money / actually want to go see the games.
Number 6.
Now, this is not the only stadium deal that Josh Harris is working on. He has had some interesting twists and turns with his stadium dealings in Philadelphia as he tries to build something for the Sixers. So is that affecting this?
Yeah, look, anytime you go, like our North Star, it really is the same approach, which is ultimately like, what's the best, like I said, there's a lot of factors, but what's the best thing to do for the underlying population, kind of. And in the case of Philly, we ended up in an amazing situation where we're developing an arena, in the sports complex in Philly for the Sixers. We're developing the Center City in Philly. We have Comcast as a partner. We're getting hockey and basketball. So I think that we ended up with an amazing situation and for Philly, right? And obviously it's a little more complicated here because it's multi-jurisdictional, but we're keeping our eye on the same thing and trying to balance everything and do what we think is the best thing for the city, for the overall region, and the fans and the team. And that's how we're going to think about it. But it was a good education.
A good education, and one that he says, he said it in there, he reiterates it again in another answer. The two are not intertwined. The finances, everything. The only way it's intertwined is Harris Blitzer Sports Entertainment has a different knowledge base of what it's like to deal with certain jurisdictions, but it is definitely a different deal for the Commanders trying to get their stadium done for Josh Harris. So now we wait. We see what happens on the politics side of it, and hopefully they can get some deals done this offseason and start construction as soon as possible. Harris also saying later that the goal is to be done and moved in by 2030. They're also going to wind up spending over $100 million renovating Northwest Stadium, so they are continuing to pump money into making the current stadium better between now and then we'll see where everything goes from there. That's our pick 6 at 6. We'll wrap up the show, including a thought on Myles Garrett's trade request next on the Team 980. It's the Hoffman Show. Holy crap, Anthony. We just did a whole show.
We did indeed, man. It flew by.
Oh, man. I just had my headphones working on both ears for the first time in like 3 weeks. And then I moved. And now they're not again. Not the life I deserve.
I feel your pain, Craig.
No, you don't. You don't even wear. I don't get how you do it. You just crank your headphones up and then you can hear without actually putting them on.
Yes, sir.
Yeah. I don't think that would work for me.
The thing is, though, Craig, only one of my earphones work, though. And I don't know why.
Yep.
It's been like that since I got here.
Sorry, I just unplugged. Now I can't hear anything you're saying.
You hear me now?
Yeah, I got you.
Yeah, so I can really only hear out of one earphone. And it's been like that since the transition from Silver Spring to here. Like, literally, my first day here, I've only been able to hear out of one headphone. And I don't know why.
You think it's your headphones or you think it's the jack? Like, have you tried different headphones?
Nah, I don't think it's the headphones because I've gone through Beats. I've gone through.
It's always. So, what would happen if you told the engineers that was the case?
I don't think it would be any different.
I think you should and see if they'll fix it.
Okay.
They can't know. We can't put it on them if they haven't been told. Have you ever told anybody?
No.
Does Toby know that ask Toby. Because Toby
I
just
promise if
studio.
Toby put his headphones in my jack, only one headphone will work.
Toby, as someone who's operated the board over there, is that true? No. Toby just
Toby's trolling. Don't listen to Toby. He's trolling.
That was very convincingly done. That was a good job, Toby. As for the back to sports and outside of Anthony's headphones, the Luka trade was crazy and unexpected. The Myles Garrett news today, I think, was far more expected. I definitely it's interesting talking to Browns people when they were here this season. People were definitely like, yeah, I wonder how much longer Myles is going to deal with this crap. And honestly, good for my response to this is good for Myles Garrett because Myles Garrett has been a good soldier in a terrible organization for way too long. Like Myles Garrett should have done this 3 years ago. When I say that, that's not a criticism of Myles Garrett. So I'm going to rephrase. Myles Garrett could have done this 3 years ago, and nobody would have batted an eye. Because the Browns are poop. The Browns are a terrible organization. The Browns are embarrassing. They're run by, I don't say this stuff often. I'm not like a hot takey, name-calling sports radio host. The Browns are run by morons. They don't know what they're doing. They're terrible owners who completely handcuff, I think, some very smart people in their front office. I think it's always interesting that the Browns front office is filled with candidates for GM jobs. They're always like, oh, this guy should be a candidate. This guy. There's like 3 or 4 people in that Browns front office that are always on the hot GM list. Them and the Eagles typically are tied for the most, and that doesn't make any sense because the Eagles are great and Howie's been the guy forever, and the Browns are terrible. But that Myles Garrett has been a good soldier. I think he wanted to be like a one-team Hall of Fame guy, and I think eventually his desire to win and the fact that the Browns keep doing incompetent things, specifically probably at the quarterback position, because I don't think that Deshaun Watson is well liked in that building. Nevertheless, what is going on with him from a football standpoint? And I just think he was like, you're going to bring that guy back? And now he might miss the whole season because he retore his Achilles anyway. But this is enough of this clown show. Get me out of here. My career is not going to be long enough for you guys to turn this around. And now the question is what is Myles Garrett worth on the open market? And does Cleveland pull that? I think Cleveland should. It sucks. You can put his number up in the Ring of Fame the day he retires, but just do right by your guy and do the thing. But the question is what would you give up? Because if you're we'll spend time on this tomorrow, Anthony. If you're Washington, how much are you willing to give up? Because is there a player, if you could just magically add one player from any team, poach any player for free, how many guys are you adding to Washington's roster before Myles Garrett?
Not many.
Maybe, I could make an argument.
Micah's younger.
Sure. I could make a Micah argument. I could make a Pat Surtain argument. Give me the premier corner in football.
Maybe a Jalen Carter, maybe. That's a maybe, though.
You could make it with age. I think you could make a Jalen Carter argument for sure. But even if you give me those three, are there five guys?
Nah.
You're not trading Jaden for any other quarterback outside of Mahomes, and even then, like, you have to think about it because of the age. And again, like, we're trading for free, but the contract is still the contract. How is Patrick Mahomes at his contract number more valuable than Jaden at his contract number? Like, that's a real discussion we could have, but it's not a no-brainer. Offense, I don't know if there's another offensive player. Like, if you could tell me I could get prime Trent Williams, I'd think about it. But, like, I don't know that I'm taking him over Myles Garrett even then.
Nah.
Like, he's the best edge player in the league.
Yep. It runs through him. He said it.
They need an edge player as much as they need anything else. So, yeah, what's that worth to you?
I mean, I was looking at the contract for, not the contract, what was given up for Khalil Mack back in 2017. And he was coming
first, right?
He was coming off a 10.5 sack season. Myles Garrett is coming off a 14 sack season. He's in the running for Defensive Player of the Year again. It's going to be a lot. It's going to be more than those 2 firsts, a third, and a 6. Like, but at the same token, I think AP, like, he's traded for Trent Williams before. He's traded for McCray. He's not afraid of the big guy.
He's not. He's definitely not.
No.
But he got those guys at a discount.
Yeah, he did.
He got those guys when the incumbent team was down on them. And I don't know. That's discussion. That's probably the discussion we'll have tomorrow here on the show. That's it for today's show. Do I have another minute, Anthony, or do I need to stop talking in 5 seconds?
You have 50 seconds.
I have 50 seconds.
And you have 45 seconds.
Okay. I can do that math. We'll talk about that throughout the show tomorrow. We'll also start taking a peek at the Super Bowl because it's easy to forget with all this other stuff that's happening. The Super Bowl's this weekend, so we'll start to get into that a little bit, maybe a little bit more on the Luka trade because I still feel like there's so much we left on the table. We didn't talk about the Lakers side of that. By the way, the Spurs made a huge trade for De'Aaron Fox yesterday. De'Aaron Fox now has Wemby to play with, so that's fun. And can the Wizards get involved in any of this? Plus, who knows what news breaks between now and tomorrow? It's the fun of it all. So we'll get to all that tomorrow. If you missed any part of the show today, check out the podcast. Search The Hoffman Show wherever it is that you get yours. And also not forget to do real things tomorrow. See you tomorrow on The Hoffman Show.